Are you awakening or are you just burnt out? Here's how to know the difference. So, when it comes to looking at spiritual awakening, I think sometimes when we're at the beginning stages of knowing if we're awakening, we might be confusing the symptoms of real burnout instead of thinking that we're awakening. And I know this is one of those tricky topics, so I want to break it down really simple and easy for you so that you can know the difference personally in relationship to your spiritual journey. Let's dive in. Hey there, it is Ashley from theawakenstate.net, and today I really want to dive headfirst into this physical symptom that I see plague so many different people, and that is where we are confusing being energetically drained and sensitive within our spiritual journey versus having burnout. For example, we might be feeling that we are experiencing burnout and we're labeling it as burnout, but the reality is we might just have some literal spiritual awakening symptoms occurring behind the scenes. And it's important to understand the core differences between the two. So let's just dive right into it, okay? So here's the difference between looking at the physical symptoms of awakening signs versus burnout. Now, when we have physical symptoms happen in our spiritual journey, a lot of the times it can be kind of similar to in relationship to burnout, but at the same time, they're also a little bit different. So when we think about spiritual awakening, we might be having fatigue and body aches and headaches. At the same time, we have a deep yearning and longing of internal change and deeper insights starting to happen to us. So it kind of makes us more retrospective and very much like where we're going inward into thinking about our life and our life changes. And then at the same time, we might have a breakdown, but that breakdown leads to a breakthrough. And this is where it kind of gets different because we can see here that a lot of when we have physical symptoms happen with spiritual awakening, a lot of times it can lead more to a spiritual revelation. It can lead to deep insight where we might have a breakdown, but it leads to a personal breakthrough where we experience a deep emotional release. Now, at the same time, if we were to think about burnout and the physical changes that are happening with burnout, we have to look at this a little bit more differently. When we have burnout happen, we might have a lot of irritability and mental and emotional exhaustion, but at the same time, we have a lot of apathy or where we feel very jaded about life. We have no motivation really. And this is really one of those things where we might have muscle tension and we might have some body aches, but in general, there's no breakthrough. There's no spiritual revelation. And most importantly, if we are having those physical symptoms, there isn't a mental and emotional component to them. And instead, it's more like we feel mentally just depleted. And that's really the difference. And now in terms of looking at our mental and emotional side, again, we have to connect this to the mind-body connection. When we have an awakening happen, we have mental and emotional symptoms occur naturally due to that rising of the Kundalini energy because of the mind-body connection. And I always like to say, and this is my personal theory, is when we have a spiritual awakening, we're reconnecting the mind back to the body. So a lot of people live disconnected from the mind. And because of this, when we have a spiritual awakening occur, we're literally reconnecting the mind back to the body so we can be more present inside our body. A lot of people are not present in their body. They're dysregulated from their body. And so this is also the difference between awakening symptoms and burnout symptoms. So when it comes to looking at that mental and emotional component, the number one thing I really want you to grasp here is that awakening will have more of an emotional release. It will feel more like highs and lows, but not at a point where it feels outside of your control, where you feel like you're having bouts of depression or lack of motivation, or where you are getting caught up in your head to the point where you decide to not take action at all. It's rather a moment of where you're going into have introspection, but you're also taking that with you and embodying spiritual principles back into your life. So there's a mental and emotional component to those symptoms, but at the same time, there isn't any like apathy, there isn't lack of motivation, and so forth. Okay. So the hugest difference between mental and emotional symptoms between awakening signs and burnout is what you'll notice here is when you have an awakening, there might be some rapid changes. It's very overwhelming, but it's also exciting. It's also like I'm yearning to change, but I'm not kind of like tripping on like what is happening. Instead, there's more of this component of like your emotions are kind of fluxing due to all the change, but there isn't really, when we come at it from an understanding of burnout, when we look at what burnout is really kind of more so you're emotionally and mentally depleted. So you almost reach this point where you're irritable. You almost feel emotionally numb. You might be having these sensations of where you just have no motivation because you are just operating on pure empty. I have experienced burnout before, and it's definitely wildly different than spiritual awakening. Burnout can leave you incredibly depleted and jaded and almost emotionally numb, where you just kind of are going through the motions of life and you're not really sure like what to do. You're not really sure which way's up, which way's down, what do I want to do next? And instead there's just this like monotonous kind of jaded sensation. Now, here's the thing though. I think it's also really important to emphasize that when it comes to burnout, we might be kind of cynical or arrogant or kind of like bitter or judgmental because there's so much lack going on behind the scenes. And this is a really good segue here because we can see here that the person that's probably experiencing burnout is soul starved. They are starving their soul. They are operating on empty. They are soul starved. They need that soul nourishment of filling their own cup, doing what makes them happy, and so forth. Like, I feel like, we're talking about this, but we, at the same time, if you are experiencing burnout, oh my gosh, make time for yourself. Make sure that you are filling your own cup back up. Make sure that you are taking time to do anything for yourself, to just even take 5 to 10 minutes to do something you enjoy, to just take a minute of conscious breathing, do pranayama, just allow yourself 5 to 10 minutes of just peace, just so you can slowly get back on track, because that alone can help. And most importantly, self-care. Now, when it comes to looking at one of the other top changes we see here, it's our desire for change. So a lot of times when we have burnout, there is this element of I am so tired and sick of my routine, but at the same time, I'm not doing anything about it. At the same time, I'm not changing anything. I'm refusing to change. And at the same time, there's a lack of motivation or almost a freeze mode in relationship to change. So it's almost like we're procrastinating. We're really kind of stuck in our ways. We're in a rigid pattern. We're in rigid ideas and refusing to change. Whereas when it comes to spiritual awakening, this is a totally different story because we are experiencing change on a level of internal and emotional. Literally, we are shifting. We are shifting from the inside out. And because of that, there is a deep longing and a change to break free from our past self, to really break free from the old ways of being, from who we were as a person versus who we choose to be, and so forth. To close this out, basically, when it comes to looking at burnout versus awakening, a lot of the times the hugest differentiation is a lot of times when we have burnout, we are often really stuck and feel trapped in our routine. Whereas when we have a spiritual awakening happen, we have a deep, profound desire to change, to break free from the past self. At the same time, we are accepting of change. We are accepting of really letting go. Even if it's hard, even if it's scary, there's an element where we're still accepting change. Whereas someone who feels trapped in their routine, they don't have a lot of motivation. They might feel a bit of like in a freeze mode or they feel kind of almost insecure about creating change. So because of this, that element of feeling trapped or trapped in your routine, where we have a sense of burnout and we're not really allowing ourselves to make a change. Whereas when we have spiritual awakening occur, there is so many internal shifts occurring that we are creating internal and external change happening behind the surface. So while we might be feeling energetically drained or sensitive in that moment, at the same time with spiritual awakening, we are having a bunch of internal growth occur behind the scenes. So finally, when it comes to really wrapping this up, the hugest thing I want to tell you is when it comes to looking at the difference between these two concepts, I think it's really powerful to know that it's easy to feel like maybe there's something wrong with you, or you have a health problem, or you feel that there's a mental health problem. And while I'm not a doctor, I do believe that sometimes it's really, really easy and super common to completely feel that what's happening to you isn't a spiritual awakening. But the illusion is that it might just be a spiritual awakening happening, and the changes are so rapid and consuming on your nervous system that you're mistaking them as mental or even physical problems, when in actuality it's more of an energetic and a mind-body problem that is happening behind the scenes. And so when we look at concepts such as burnout, maybe you're freaking out that you're experiencing burnout, but reality is you might just be going through an internal state of growth. Now, sure, we could, say a caveat here and say that, well, maybe my burnout is a spiritual awakening symptom. That could happen too, but in more times than not, we're having these experiences because of that internal shift, that internal space of growth that's occurring, that level of looking at your spiritual growth in relationship to breaking free from the past self and moving forward into the new paradigm self or higher self. Now, not to get too far off the deep end, because I want to start wrapping this up. When it comes to looking at these concepts, the hugest thing you need to remember is to have discernment on feeling into. Do you feel like you're actually experiencing burnout, or is it just symptoms of awakening? And I think this is one of those things where it's like you have to have that level of discernment. So I hope this video shed a ton of light for you on understanding the difference between those two concepts. Because here's the thing. I know you can't just read this in a textbook. That's unfortunately the truth. And so when it comes to looking at these concepts, I think it's really powerful to see that there is a difference. And most importantly, it's good to seek help if you are having burnout or if you even are experiencing a spiritual awakening. One of the best things you can do to help support yourself on this journey when you have physical symptoms is to work on your intuition. And if you have any questions about this topic in particular, if you're suffering from burnout, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to help you if you're experiencing those feelings. And most importantly, if you like our videos, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.